moving into the surgeons. And again, I remember when I was out of Las Vegas listening to all of the speakers, and I kept thinking, how in the world can a surgeon do this? You know, I mean, you're talking about high costs. And I heard a general surgeon from Chicago explain how he did this. It was mind-boggling to me. And so I was really excited putting this together, saying we've got to have surgeons. And so we have different kinds here doing different things and are here to share with you. The first one is Dr. Robert Sewell, who is from Dallas, Texas. Thank you for coming up and getting into some of our wonderful, cool Minnesota weather. I'm not going to read his bio as I haven't for the others because you can read it yourself. We are more interested in hearing from him. So, Dr. Sewell, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And I want to thank the AAPS for inviting me to come and speak with you. I have to tell you, after this morning, I just had this wonderful sense of comfort of being surrounded by other people who kind of think and act and believe the way that I do. I'm sure that most of you are surrounded by folks in your communities that maybe don't think, or some like you do. Maybe they don't think at all, but I would suggest to you that there is certainly a difference perhaps between primary care and the surgeons, but there's not that much difference. We all are basically physicians, and I think that if I had to go back and change anything about the AAPS, I'd probably drop the S. I'd just probably, this is an Association of American Physicians, and I think that we collectively think very much alike. At least we should. I'm going to say some things perhaps here today that have been said earlier, but I hope that if you're not already opted out, that it may challenge you to relook at that issue, whether you're a surgeon or not. And I hope it makes you a little uncomfortable if you stay in all of those third-party involvements, because I believe that there's a real rational, logical reason not to participate. If you go around in your community, you'll find that most of the physicians seem to be angry, frustrated. Some of them are apathetic, burned out, you name it. And that's really a sad commentary on our profession. Dave mentioned that cash was easier for primary care and is hard, maybe a little more difficult for surgeons. I will tell you that the problem for surgeons is we can't get totally away from insurance, because when we take a patient to the hospital bill is usually about 9 or 10 times what the surgeon's bill is, and sometimes even more than that. And plus, the patients themselves may not be prepared to pay $2,000 or $3,000 to a surgeon for a complicated surgical procedure. So we basically go through the out-of-network or the opted-out process. We still help patients file their insurance. We give them the information that they need. Some people actually have the patients file their own insurance. I have people in my office that I use to file the insurance claims for the patients, but we don't accept the insurance contract, so therefore we actually work for the patient. And I wanted to also clarify another terminology. You know, in any time people want to change the ideas or change the philosophies, the first thing you do is you change the language, or you control the language. This idea of physician reimbursement is absolutely wrong. We don't get reimbursed, we get paid. And we seem to have forgotten that. Reimbursement is what you do if you go off to a medical meeting on somebody else's nickel, but you're paying out of your own pocket, and then you submit the receipts back to them and say, reimburse me for my expenses. Physicians don't have expenses in providing their services other than their office expenses. They actually should be getting paid for that. And so I think we need to get back to using that kind of language, so that because there's a little different psychology associated with it when you talk to people about what you get paid. There's also a lot of other issues with the third parties involved besides just the monetary ones, and I think they've created some real challenging times for us as physicians. The government rules, we just saw a litany of new regulations that are being laid out. Hospital rules, insurance rules, certification rules, licensure rules, et cetera, to say nothing of the liability issues. I started my general surgery practice in 1979. I came out of a residency program in San Antonio, Texas, where most everybody went into private practice. I started my solo practice. Within about 13 years, there was 6 of us in our group. We built this big multi-surgeon group with the idea that we were going to provide all things to all people in our community. And after about 12 or 13 years ago, I decided there were some issues between me and some of my partners. They had more to do with clinical issues than anything else, and I left the practice and decided to go out solo. What was the first thing I did? Broke away from a very successful 6-person practice, went solo. Very first thing you did? Sign up for every insurance contract, because all the contracts were through the group. So I got on Aetna and United Healthcare and Blue Cross and Travelers and all the others that were around at that time. And I found myself busier than a one-armed paper hanger. I was absolutely covered up with work to the point where I had no time off. Now I don't even have a partner to take call with. So I decided that something has got to change. My kids were growing up without their dad at home. I had a patient come into the office one day. He was actually, I got a call first from a urologist who said, I have a fellow who's a friend of another patient, that family member, et cetera. Can you see this guy? He's got a hernia and he's from out of town. What was the first question out of my mouth? What kind of insurance does he have? He doesn't have any insurance, but I don't think I'd worry about it. Okay, send him down. I see the guy on a Thursday morning. By Friday morning, we're in the operating room. I did laparoscopic bilateral inguinal hernia repairs on this fellow. Monday morning, it was outpatient. Monday morning, he came back to the office for his follow-up because he's catching a plane. He pays my office manager 24 $100 bills laid out on the table, and he was the happiest guy I've ever seen. Of course, his plane he got on was going back to Damascus, Syria, where he could not have gotten that operation at any price. For him, it didn't matter. The value of what I provided was real. 2 weeks later, I had one day in the office where there were 3 consecutive fellows came in the office. Every one of them was between the ages of 35 and 50. Every one of them had a left inguinal hernia. Every one of them had Cigna HMO. And these 3 potential litigants all recommended that they were there because I was the laparoscopic hernia surgeon, and that's what they wanted. They'd done their research, and it better be good. As I told you, I got paid $2,400 to treat one guy for bilateral inguinal hernias. Those 3 fellows, all told, Cigna was going to pay me somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 total for the 3 of them. And I called my office manager together, and I'd had just about enough of one day. You know, surgeons, we tend to act reflexly at some times. And so I said, I want out of every managed care contract we're in. Of course, every one of my employees kind of sit there, and their eyes got real big, and they became pale, and they were ready to pass out. And they said, well, what are we going to do? I said, I don't care what we have to do. I want out. It took us more than 6 months just to extract ourselves from the various different contracts that we had spent all this time trying to get into. And even for 2 years after that, my name continued to appear on the various the log books that the patients get of the doctors that are participating. And patients would come in, they'd be angry. It says right here that you're participating. I haven't participated in 2 years. It was a nightmare to extract oneself, but in the end, it has been probably the best thing that I possibly could have done. Now, I'm no longer nearly as busy as I used to be, which is just fine. And the fact of the matter is that every patient that I see is one that I can treat as a VIP, as was described earlier by one of the primary care docs. We spend an hour with every new patient. We go over everything that we can think of to talk about, and the patients truly appreciate what it is, and they are often surprised, in fact, sometimes shocked, that the actual cost of the surgical procedure for the surgeon's fee is not nearly as high as they were led to believe. We've seen this happen repeatedly in the media, where the New York Times talks about how many tens of thousands of dollars doctors get paid to do an amputation of a leg. But the more important thing, this isn't just about the economics. This is about the freedom and the independence that it provides me and every other person who's gone through this. But after I opted out, and I have to admit, I did not really appreciate this because I was in the system. I was part of the system. After I got out, I had some time on my hands, remodeled the office, and put up a few new things on the wall. And one of the things that I found in the drawer that I stuck up on the wall was a copy of the American College of Surgeons Fellowship Pledge. ACS was established 100 years ago this year. And I'm fortunate enough now to be a governor of that organization with the understanding that I'm from a different group, the American Society of General Surgeons. But in that fellowship pledge, the third paragraph, well, you have to understand, first of all, that when you go back and look at the history of why the college was ever established, it was because there was a problem at that time of ethics. And one of the big issues was called fee splitting, where primary care physicians would refer patients to a surgeon with the expectation of a kickback. And the college designers, the people who were at the beginning of it, said this is not right. So it's going to lead to unnecessary procedures, it's going to lead to higher costs, it's going to be a problem that we won't be able to undo. So, in order to be a fellow of the college, you have to take this pledge. Third paragraph says, upon my honor, I hereby declare I will not practice fee splitting. Sounded like a really positive statement. Fast forward to the early 90s, the college actually changed the fellowship pledge a little bit to accommodate something that they recognized existed, but didn't really know exactly how to deal with. Because when you contract with a third party that pays you based on not what you bill, but on what they decide your services are worth, and you can submit a bill for $100 and they'll pay you $60 or $40, who keeps that difference? Who takes advantage of that discount, if you will? Well, it's the entity that actually is in control of where the patient goes. And if you don't play their game, they don't send you the patients. Exactly the same situation as if you had a primary care doctor who said, gee, if you'll give me a kickback, I'll send you all the business that you want. But if you won't, I'll send them down the road to Joe. It's the same thing from an ethical and a moral standpoint. And so for those of you in the audience who are dependent, as most surgeons are, on referrals, I think we need to really seriously think about this from an ethics issue. I remained on Medicare, though, up until this last year. And the reason I did was because I felt bad. I felt like, gee, these old people don't have a choice. I even went to the point of actually being a delegate to the American Medical Association from the ASGS, from the American Society of General Surgeons. Now, that you talk about an eye-opener. You go to the House of Delegates meetings, and it's amazing the number of us that are on the other side. That are basically all for the single payer, that are basically all for a socialized system. But those people were at least willing to listen to one idea that I had. I threw it up there as a resolution that called on the AMA to actually write its own legislation. And you may or may not be aware of this, but this actually happened. It passed the AMA House almost 3-1. To call on the AMA to write this legislation that would allow for a new payment process under Medicare. And the new payment system would be called the Medicare Patient Empowerment Act. And basically what it would do would be to take Medicare from being a defined benefit program, which is what it is today, for each individual patient to a defined contribution, where Medicare would decide how much they would pay toward an individual's bill, but not be the price fixed process that we have today. That bill has been written. It is actually in the Congress. It was introduced back in 2010, shortly after Obamacare was passed, and was introduced in the House by Tom Price, an orthopedic surgeon from Georgia, and it was introduced in the Senate by Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. It has subsequently been now reintroduced in this newest Congress, and I would encourage you to go look at it, the Medicare Patient Empowerment Act. The AMA said they were going to push it. They haven't. They haven't because it is all about freedom and freedom of choice, where the patient could choose to come any doctor and you could decide whether or not you wanted to accept Medicare payment or not. You could decide to charge one person more or less, something that you can't do today. So anyway, just so that you'll know, I've made an effort to work through the system, and I will tell you, I don't think you can do that. I don't think we can change the system. I think the system is too big, and there's too many people getting too much from various different directions. So what it boils down to is, are you going to do this individually? I think it's interesting that for those of you in the audience, and there's a lot of gray hairs out there too, I appreciate that fact. Many of you know what I'm talking about. When HMO boom started, where did it start? It started in California, it started on the East Coast, and it started here in Minnesota. Sorry about that. Yeah, well, and those of us in Texas were looking at it and they say, oh, we think we can hold it off. I would challenge the people here in Minnesota to start a new revolution, to start a new process. It's called freedom. It's called freedom to choose for yourself and for your patients. And I think you'll be surprised, even if you're a surgeon, you'll be surprised at the number of people who will still come to you if you provide them with a better service, more personal care, not this some answering machine answers the phone. You actually have a real person answer the phone, and you are accessible to the patient, where if they want to talk to the doctor, absolutely, I'll talk to them. People appreciate that, and then they have a sense of value to that, and they will go out of their way to find you. They'll go out of their way to find ways of sending additional patients to you. You do need a little bit of a niche. You can't just kind of be all things to all people. If you try and be all things to all people, you'll be nothing to anybody. And with that, I know that David's over here kind of already given me the 2-minute warning here, but I just want you to know that this is not easy. It takes courage, it takes conviction, and it takes cooperation. And that's why I think an organization like AAPS is a great place for you to congregate, to get re-energized when you're feeling as though that what you're trying to do maybe isn't going to work. But don't undervalue yourself. You've spent a lifetime creating an opportunity that you can provide something to people that they have a hard time getting. They're not just, you're not going to be able to replace doctors just because, you know, we don't want to play their game. I wrote a blog piece, or I write a regular blog called Spirit of Healthcare, and there's a piece in your handout that talks a little bit about the difference between a job and a profession. We're a profession, and as such, we have to guard that profession. When we contract with someone else, whether it be insurance companies or some third or some hospital or whatever, we basically turn ourselves into employees. It's a job, and it can be taken away from you. They can't take it away from you if you treat it like a profession. With that, I'll finish and be happy to answer questions later in this other session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to just keep moving. I think we have to do one little technical thing here, right?
Yep, that's Casey. You
Huh?
I can do it while you're...
All right. Well, I have nothing to say.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to stand and stare at you. That never happens, believe me. But I don't have anything pithy to say. That's one of those words you got to be careful with. Minnesota is a great innovator. I do want to remind you that we provided the 60th vote for Obamacare. His name is Al Franken. Did I really say that? Okay. Dr. Adam Harris. Now we're going to San Antonio.
Right.
Wonderful town, San Antonio, Texas, orthopedic training at Rouge Presbyterian, adult reconstruction joint replace. I'm already saying more than I meant to. Please welcome Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. This is a talk I've given now at a few of the Thrive Not Survive conferences, and so it must be received well because I've been invited back a few times. I will say that about 6.5, 7 years ago, I was sitting in the audience listening to other people talk about their experience about opting out of Medicare or opting out of third-party payers, and it was quite a frightening experience to me because I am an adult reconstruction surgeon. I replace hips and knees. Who are my patients? My patients are old folks, right? But a number of things after that meeting kind of empowered me to opt out of Medicare, and it has been one of the best decisions that I've ever made. Now, not really needed for this talk, but I have no conflicts with regard to the topic. I'm going to start a little bit far afield. 10 years after, as a British rock group, they were a one-hit wonder and not known for their British rock groups are not known for their conservative ways, but they have a great song. I want you to listen to the beginning of it here. Anyone recognize it? Yeah, okay. Remember the words? Now, the rest of the song is mindless pap, so we'll pass on the rest of it. So it's up to us. It is up to us to do something here. And I'm going to start by asking, what if they gave a health care plan and no doctors showed? Right? Right? Now, if a man yells, "You lie," in a room full of politicians, who's he talking about? Now, this is not a comment on computers. I don't intend to be politically correct. But I will say in the political spectrum, one can look at our president falling off the left side of the world, along with Nancy Pelosi. Right? Maybe on the right end of the world you have these two characters. And you figure someone like John McCain is probably sitting here, which is about where I sit as far as overall politics are concerned. And so that's a little bit of my background. But the recent state of affairs is a little bit more like this. Okay? Or perhaps, maybe this is the question we really need to ask is how do we avoid this problem? So the issue is how do you get out of the system? How do you disappear from the map? And you have to ask first, what is your motivation? Is it money, lifestyle, recognition, locally, nationally? Is it just altruism, or is it satisfaction of a job well done? I'm going to put one more frame of reference here. Does everyone know the story about Sammy the shirt maker? Anyone hear this? Okay. Sammy the shirt maker is not doing all that well in his business, and his accountant comes to him and says, I'm sorry, you can't keep this up. You lose $1 on every shirt that you make. And Sammy turns to him and says, I'm not concerned. I'll make it up on volume. So you can try to practice medicine this way, perhaps. I don't choose to do that. But productivity has a limit. You can't ask a symphony orchestra to be more productive by playing faster. Okay. Another bit of frame of reference is you've heard the myth of the frog in the frying pan. And if you drop a frog into a pot of boiling, into a pan that's filled with hot oil or hot water, it will jump right out and be unharmed. But if you put it into a pan with cool water, and then slowly turn up the heat. Eventually, you'll have frog's legs for dinner. And part of the problem is that physicians have been acting like frogs for far too long. This is Trent Lott. He was a former Senate Majority Leader, and I'm aware of a group of physicians that went to lobby him concerning the payment, or they called it reimbursement, for various procedures under Medicare. And he asked them, he asked all the docs who went there, do you accept Medicare? And all of the docs who were trying to lobby him said yes, that they did. So he said, come back when you quit taking what we give you. So ladies and gentlemen, I suggest that we quit taking what they're giving us. Back in 2006, the Congressional Budget Office made this statement: more than 90% of physicians and providers agree to participate in Part B, right? And this is the key point: it's uncertain at what point such responses to declining payment rates would have a significant negative impact on Medicare patients' access to services. So in short, they're counting on us acting like frogs, right? Come back when you quit taking what we give you. So I suggest you don't try to be Sammy the shirt maker. You will go broke. Don't try to be a frog, because you will be sautéed. Now, a couple of things that they're trying to do to us here. Consulting fees were cut recently, okay? No difference between a new patient visit and a consult visit, okay? And here the level of, we have a little chart, the level of service, and the difference per consultation. Now let's work this out. If you see 2 patients a week, average level 3, you're losing $7,000 a year, but if you see 10 new patients a week, level 3, it's $35,000, you know, and it can add up to a lot of money pretty quickly. And they're counting us frogs. Well, you know, it's only $100 a visit, but it's a lot of money at the end of the year. And then there are more than 13,000 pages of federal regulations concerning our practice in our offices before Obamacare, right? At least 130,000. And at least 11,000 of those consisted of what we had to do in our office before the new law, okay? Now, the government insists that they don't practice medicine, okay? The constitutional amendment that brought Medicare into being specifically prohibits the government from practicing medicine. But let's see what they do. Hips and knee replacement, right? After I do a hip and knee replacement on a Medicare patient, the hospital chart will be audited by someone whose average level of education is that of a high school graduate. Average level. So we've got some high school dropouts doing this work. And they'll decide whether or not there's been enough non-operative treatment to justify the statement, failure of non-operative management. And they'll look for various things. Specific dates. Patient was on naproxen starting April 1st of 2011 through December 2nd of 2000. You know, this is the type of information they want. I mean, that's very hard information to gather. The patients don't remember it. And if you make it up, of course, that's fraud. Right? Dates and number of sessions of physical therapy, specific about diets, weight loss, all this sort of stuff. And then they'll deem the surgery either appropriate or unnecessary. And if it's unnecessary, nobody gets paid, at least nobody who is a Medicare provider. That's not the hospital, the anesthesiologist, the physical therapist, nobody. Now, as I do own a small share in a physician-owned hospital, I know that on a Medicare patient, the hospital does profit. It profits about $200 out of about $12,000 that the government pays. It doesn't take a whole lot of those Medicare patients those cases not getting paid to all of a sudden the hospital is upside down. But they won't give us guidance as to what is appropriate because, of course, that would be practicing medicine. And remember, they do this auditing after the fact. Auditing comes in many different flavors. There's big alphabet soup. The RAC committees, the recoupment auditing contractors, were, in fact, one of the key reasons that I opted out, because it's not possible, I don't believe, for any physician to have every chart be perfect. We all do the best we can. And hopefully, if there are errors, they're all of omission rather than of commission. But I would challenge to find a doctor that you can go in and look at every chart and find no mistakes. It doesn't exist. But each of those mistakes can be considered fraud or abuse and fined $10,000 or $11,000 per incident. Right? Now, there's Medicare reporting. Now there's a system they're able to look back 10 years. And you have only 60 days once they say, hey, you owe us money, to identify and put your defense together. Now, I don't know about you, but we've changed DMRs a couple of times, and so that I can't look back right now with any ease before 2006. So they want something from 2002, I'm in trouble. So then there's False Claims Act, and you can have up to 5 years jail time, $25,000 fines, civil monetary penalties, and this was all before Obamacare, which adds lots of things. And this, you may have heard the story about Dr. James Natale. Okay, this is a doctor was audited by the government, and they brought him to trial for Medicare fraud and a number of other things. He was found innocent of fraud, okay, but convicted of making a false statement on an operative report, and he's in jail. He's been in jail for about a year at this point in time. Now, this organization is working, has filed briefs to try and help spring him. But this is a talented cardiovascular surgeon, did a good job by his patients, as far as I know. And actually, he was a fellow in cardiovascular surgery when I was an intern rotating through the intensive care unit. Not that I remember him well, but... So then they can profile your practice and determine your level of services. And of course, you know that if you bill too little, you are discriminating against everybody else that you bill too much, and that's also penalties for that. They'll compare your work to your community. And you may legitimately do a better exam and bill more at level 4 and level 5 exams, and you earned it. But if your community bills 2s and 3s, you stand out. Right? And you've just invited a little friendly review from the government into your office. And so, if you do no government billing, you disappear from the system. And so going back, what does this mean here? Which is a better evaluation? You can look on the level 4 exam on the left side of the screen here, right? That qualifies as level 4. It has enough points in the system to get a level 4. You look at the exam on the right, and this is a very, very detailed examination of a bad knee. That only qualifies for level 2. How long does it take to do the one on the left? Okay? I submit to you which one is really fraud. Which one does the government call fraud? Okay? So Justice, the original Lady Justice is not blind, is not blindfolded. The current popular version of Lady Justice has a blindfold, but the scales are tipped one way. The original Lady Justice not only yields a sword, but has her eyes wide open. Then there are other systems in the government. It's pay for performance is now being built into the system. Initially, it was a way to earn a few extra dollars if you met all the metrics. Okay? Initially, only a handful of issues, things that we probably should do anyway. But less than 60% of doctors who tried actually earned the extra couple of percentage. Okay? So what sort of things do they have to do as far as the surgeon is concerned? Okay? One of the 4 metrics initially introduced had to do with perioperative antibiotics. I had to collect and report all this information on 98% of the patients to meet the metric. Okay? That's a lot of information, a lot of time, energy, and paperwork. And I looked at how much time I was going to have to pay employees to try and collect this information. I'd spend about $100 to get an extra 30. And I said, I'm not doing that. Now Medicare requires compliance with these metrics in order to earn their meager fee schedule. But what are the metrics that are involved now? Okay? This is a pre-op visit on a hip replacement patient. Sometimes they'll come up with colorectal cancer screening or urinary incontinence in women when the patient's a guy. Okay? Still, you have to put down, not applicable because the patient's a male. Right? So, remember Obamacare came in as a 2-stage system. The first stage of Obamacare was part of the February 2009 Banking Salvage Act, so to speak. Right? It established the Committee on Comparative Effectiveness Research, a $1 billion startup and a $350 million annual budget. This is morphed into the IPAB at the present time. And also in that bill are the requirements for meaningful use of electronic medical records, which have morphed into the doctor becomes a spy for the government. Okay? In Obamacare, there are exactly 2 limits on the information on individual patients that the Secretary of Health and Human Services is not allowed to demand that we collect and report if you participate in this nonsense. That is legal gun ownership and ownership of ammunition. Right? I personally think that's in there to keep the NRA out of the argument when they were debating Obamacare. NRA, you never heard anything about it. But after Newtown, I think that at least one of two of the 23 executive orders that Obama signed after Newtown removes that restriction, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services can demand anything. And I'm told that in VA hospitals now they're asking patients on admission, do you own firearms? Do you want to wait? If someone's here for their bad hip, does it make a darn bit of difference if they own firearms? If they're here for a sinus infection, do I care? If they're in your office for a regular GYN exam, does it matter? It has no bearing, but you have to take your time, energy, and paperwork to complete it in order to qualify for meaningful use. And of course, whether or not you qualify is the sole discretion of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and his or her opinion is final. There is no administrative or judicial review thereof. So this is the end of privacy. Okay? Now, January 1, 2015 is a very important date. I want you to remember this. All of these compliance issues, all of these so-called quality metrics that have no bearing on good patient care are going to be required of everybody who takes any insurance contract in January 1, 2015. Okay? Every insurance company is going to want to be a qualified insurance company. You can guarantee that. But a qualified insurance company, January 1, 2015, may only contract with doctors who are compliant with these reporting metrics. Okay? Now, I will tell you that today I still take insurance, but my current plan is that by January 1, 2015, I will not. And perhaps I need a little more time than I initially thought to extract myself. So all of this, again, is not subject to administrative or judicial review. So I call it rather meaningless use. If you comply with meaningful use of electronic medical records, you get $45,000 over 5 years. Average implementation costs $160,000. If you don't comply and you take Medicare, you will get fined $42,500. Right? Don't comply with all the treatments, $100,000, possibly jail time. This is not a joke. Justice Department has declared war on doctors quite literally. This particular article has to do with a group that refused a private insurance contract because the private insurance contract was based on Medicare. So the feds sued the doctor for that. Okay? Don't have to say anymore. So the government sees two types of doctors. They're Medicare doctors who are compliant, they do all the paperwork, and they are interchangeable. The next guy is every bit as good as you are, no better, no worse. And of course, the alternative are bad doctors. Now, the ACE program was a demonstration program, happened to hit San Antonio, trying to prove that you could sell Medicare hips and knees for less money and also some cardiac procedures. And they add one more level. There are compliant doctors who are interchangeable and cheap, and then there are expensive doctors who are therefore bad. So with all of this sort of stuff, do you still want to deal with these folks? So what can you do about it? Okay? I want to talk a little bit now about my experience about opting out. I opted out July 1st, 2008. And again, I do almost nothing but adult reconstruction, and so my patients are old people. Now, of course, the economy crashed 5 months later. Wonderful timing. When you do opt out, you have 90 days to say, oops, I forgot, I didn't like this so much, and crawl back in the system, no penalty. I was a little bit out of it. Initially, my volume went down about 25%, but now my billing was not limited by all of the Medicare rules, and what I decided to do is set a fair price. And we asked some of the patients, what do you think I charge for hip or knee replacement? The lowest estimate was 4 times what I wanted to charge. The lowest estimate. Most of them were between 6 and 8 times what I charged. One of them was 20. Okay? So before I opted out, you can see it was a scary thing to do because 50% of my practice were straight Medicare, and a substantial portion of the remainder were Medicare replacement plans. But now, still a third of my practice are Medicare patients. I've kept about 2/3, and I echo the concept that if you provide something which is of service, of benefit, and of value to the patients, they will stay with you. The people who will stay with you are the ones who want to be there, not the potential plaintiffs from the insurance company. I like that line. And you look at where my money came from here, okay? And there was a pointer here. There was a pointer, okay. This blue line here is Medicare. You see that, of course, Medicare dropped to almost nothing. This line here is the private payment. Patients now paying for it themselves. And you can see it went up quite a bit here. So you look at how the collections were. My income was starting to go down as the Medicare rates were getting cut, 2007, 2008, and it's been steadily rising ever since. And you start looking at it, collections per visit, again, it's all a positive and an upslope, and my practice is now only about 5% or maybe somewhere around 10% less in volume than it was before I opted out of Medicare. But the patients and the surgeon are a great deal happier than before. But there are other benefits to this. I had before I opted out of, before I opted out of Medicare, physician assistant, and the physician assistant received a certain percentage, and the insurance companies pay, I think, something along the lines of 18% of their physician bill to the assistant, and you can see the net value in red here of where I was with the assistant, and so that at the end of the time, it happened that there's one insurance company never certified her. We had a lot of patients right near the end that were from that insurance company. They paid her more. But you see, at the end of a year and a half, or a little over a year, I'm still in the red, about $10,000. The second PA joined me after I opted out of Medicare, and of course there's some startup, but you see he's made out better too, and I get to keep a portion of, my contract with him is I keep a portion of it, and he gets the lion's share. So the net result of this whole story, I've won. What's in the victory? More time with my family, more time with each patient, positive change in income, fewer headaches, less need for caffeine. So let's talk about how can you do it. Okay. Key is preparation. Be able to articulate why you're getting out. I can tell you I got out because I was fearful of the RAC committees coming in and destroying me. Okay? I couldn't be good enough for the RAC committees, and that's why I got out. Know the legal requirements. APS is a great resource for that. Send good letters to your colleagues and to your patients. What sets you aside from others in your community? Do you get better results, more time with the patient? What is it that you can provide that's of value to the patients? And again, send out good letters. Don't blame the money. Don't be an AMA stooge here. It only makes you look greedy. Also, prepare your staff. Now, my timing also in this regard was terrible because my PA left right about the time that I opted out, and so all of a sudden I was seeing the patients that she was going to see as well as the patient I was going to see. I had very little time to get my staff trained, and for a while my own staff was saying, no, Dr. Harris doesn't want to see Medicare patients. And when I found that out, I fixed it real quickly, but still, be prepared. Make sure that your staff understands the whole picture. Make scripts. Dr. X is happy to see Medicare patients. Sees them all the time. Put them on cards next to the phones where the receptionist will answer. So it doesn't matter necessarily. It's something I tell my staff, and when I was teaching residents, tell them also. It doesn't matter what you say, it matters what people hear. So if they're hearing something different from what you're saying, try to think of a different way to say it to get your message across. And so I don't accept Medicare. This is a key confusion that you need to be able to articulate to people clearly, that I don't accept Medicare as insurance is not the same as I don't want to see Medicare patients. Now, do role playing. Do at least some of this yourself. And think about what staff members you won't need because you don't need to deal with the Medicare nonsense any longer. Prepare your patients. Talk to them well before you opt out. I like the line, you're still part of the family, we'll continue to take care of you. and at least in my practice, and almost every patient who is interested in my care, we can make it work. And it's now legal, if you got a favorite patient and they don't have a whole lot of money, it's legal to treat them for a discount or to treat them for free. And that goodwill will almost always pay back 2 or 3-fold in new patients who can pay. Okay? Now it's 5.5 years experience. So far, Medicare pays for everything else in their usual fashion. Okay, now I'm an opted-out physician, not a disenrolled physician. We can talk about that in discussions later. So I am now beyond the 3 years that the RAC can look back. If they come into my office, I say, where's your subpoena? And if they don't produce one, I call security. Okay? Now, this is also very reassuring to the patients. I read a story recently about an OBGYN doctor who was concerned about the electronic medical records and all the portability, and I think the ENT was reading about her patient's libido. I mean, it doesn't belong there. You need to maintain the privacy, but if you're opted out, you do not have to report all of this stuff to the government, and the patients, at least my patients, find great solace in that. Okay? Also, be prepared. You're going to have at least a little drop in income for a short period of time when you first do this. This is one of the pieces of advice I got when I was in the audience instead. Maybe doing legal reviews, insurance company reviews, clinical studies. Do something to get yourself ready so that you have a buffer to do that. And also prepare your family. They will see more of you. And you'll generally be in a better mood. Okay. And remember this. Most patients think that you're worth a lot more than you think you're worth. And many times what the government thinks that you're worth. So even in tough economic times, there are enough people willing to pay a reasonable price for good service. You provide good service, charge a reasonable price, and you will do very well. Thank you very much.
I think we have one more little change over here in our technology, and then we'll be on with our next speaker from Covington, Louisiana, coming up to enjoy our warm weather here in Minnesota. We just think this is the best. I mean, how can it be any better than this, right? My friend from Tucson thinks she's cold right now. So, yeah, it's 103 in San Antonio yesterday. So here, I think we're going to be ready to go quickly. So we'll get Dr. Gianoli up here. I noticed here, let's see what it was I was reading, the Ear and Balance Institute. I have some of those issues, if we can meet afterwards, located in Covington, Louisiana, since July 2000, and where his practice is limited to audiology. Otology, I want to say this. See, this is why I did this. Neurootology. I want to make sure I could say it right. There was another big word I was going to try. And skull base surgery. See, when I had my brain bleed, they said that's where it was, down there somewhere. So maybe you were the guy that would have to fix that. This is called filling time. Okay.
All right, we're good. We're ready.
I think we're good now. Will you welcome Dr. Gianoli? Thank you so much.
First of all, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be here. If you guys do not belong to the AAPS, you need to join. It has done a lot of good for myself, my practice, and a lot of other physicians. As you've been told, I'm Jerry Gianoli. I'm a neuro-otologist in Covington, Louisiana. And I just wanted to go through a little bit of my practice history. I did an otolaryngology residency and then a fellowship, and I stayed at Tulane University as an assistant professor, and I was in academics for the first 8 years of my career, where I knew absolutely nothing about the finances and economics of healthcare. I then went into private practice with Jim Sewell, who is an otologist and been in private practice a lot longer than I have been, and he's also an astute businessman, and I learned a lot from Jim. And one of the first things he started pointing out to me is how poorly I was being paid by some of the insurance plans, which I had no clue at the time. And one of the first ones that really struck me was a patient who had Mississippi Medicaid and had a large glomus tumor of the skull base that I had to remove. And some of these procedures can be extremely time-consuming. This particular one was like a 12-hour case. I mean, you do a craniotomy along with a big neck dissection involved with it. The patient's in the intensive care unit for about a week, and you're taking care of them, for the global, for the 90-day global, for the price you're paid for the surgery, which in this case was $500. Now, I'm thinking to myself, I got, 12 people in the office I'm paying to be there, the rent in the office. I'm not sure the $500 even covered the medical malpractice insurance part of that case. So without a doubt, I lost money on that surgery. About the same time, I had to call a plumber over to my house, and in a half hour, he made $150. And I thought, wow, I should have been a plumber. But at the same time, too, I could have done 2 sets of PE tubes and made more than that, and not had to do anything else and had virtually no risk with the procedure. Then in October 2001, my partner and I received a couple of letters. The first one from Medicare stating they were going to reduce the reimbursement or payment for ENGs, which is one of the workhorse tests we do for evaluation of vertigo and dizziness. The problem was the fee was going to be less than what it cost us to do the test. So again, it's not something you can make up on volume, just a matter of how fast you want to go broke. And there's 2 ways you can look at it. You can either get out of Medicare and charge a reasonable price, or you could stay in Medicare and reduce the quality of the test to keep it under the fee that you're being paid, which is what the vast majority of my colleagues have done. The other letter that we got was, my partner in particular got a letter saying, gee, you do more ENGs than the average ear, nose, and throat doctor. Okay. Implication being you're defrauding us by doing a gazillion ENGs. Well, they didn't look at the fact that all he did was inner ear work, and he didn't do any nose or sinus work, he didn't do any neck stuff, didn't do any tonsillectomies. All they saw was what he did do. And of course, the next thing would be, if this continued, would be an audit. So at that time, he's looking at his level of Medicare involvement, and he's seeing that 1/3 of his patients are Medicare patients, but only 10% of his revenue is coming from Medicare. And for me, it was an insubstantial amount either way. I didn't have a lot of Medicare patients in my practice. And he says, well, look, I want to drop out of Medicare because I figure I'll be happy to work 1/3 less and take a 10% pay cut. And so we got rid of it, and that was in 2001. Then between 2000 and 2004, we started looking more critically at all the other insurance plans and gradually started shedding the insurance plans one by one during that time period, usually about every 6 months. And then finally in November 2005, we eliminated our last insurer, which was Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that came on the heels of Hurricane Katrina. I don't know if y'all remember that little hurricane that came to southern Louisiana back then. Well, the government of Louisiana, the state of Louisiana government, enacted this emergency insurance order where the insurance companies could not deny coverage of people that did not pay their premiums. But what the doctors, what would happen is the patients would still have their coverage. The doctors wouldn't know that the patients weren't paying for their premiums, but the insurance companies didn't have to pay the doctors. And it would be at least 6 months before you'd even find out. And then if they finally did pay you, it'd be half of what the previously negotiated rate would be. So once we knew that was going on, we said, well, this is probably as good a time as any to just get rid of Blue Cross as well. And ever since then, we've been 100% third-party free. So we're going on our 8th year that we're 100% cash-based practice. We're also HIPAA non-compliant, and I did not get an NPI number until I eventually realized my patients could not get tests ordered or into the hospital without an NPI number, so I finally got one. I'm not going to go through this. You guys know what all the problems are, and everybody's gone over it today, but let's just say things aren't pretty if you're inside the system. When I was given this talk in the past, and I've given this many times, I talk about Wayne Gretzky's statement of, skate where the puck's going, not where it's been, because all the physicians keep wanting to do the old system where you got to do more and more. That ain't going to cut it anymore, and we're kind of past this. The puck has moved on. Does anyone really expect physician reimbursement from Medicare or your insurance carriers to go up? Does anybody in this room really expect that? I really don't think so. My prediction for the future of physicians, and here it is, and I've been saying this for about 10 years now, you're going to become either an employee, you're going to leave medical practice, or the third option, you're going to go third-party free. And that's it. It's just a matter of time. There's a number of advantages to doing third-party free, and I've listed them here, and again, you've heard them ad nauseum from the group today. But the thing that probably really pushed me into it was mainly for survival. I wanted to be able to practice good quality medicine, and the only way I thought I could do it was outside of this system. Because if I was pushed into this system, I would be delivering shabby medical care just like a lot of other people have been forced to do. But the one aspect of this I didn't realize until after we did it was it's a whole lot more fun. I'm thinking of some of the comments we have here. All of my patients are VIP patients. They all have my cell phone, my email address. I have become friends with my patients. It's just a lot more fun to practice medicine. Among the objections that I've heard over the years for what we've done, and of course, when we first started doing this, everybody told us we were nuts back in 2001. The primary care physicians will say, you can do it, because you're so specialized, and there's not a lot of people that do what you do. And then they also say, well, if I don't accept all the Medicare, et cetera, they'll just go down the street to see somebody else. The specialists will say that, I can't do it because my surgeries and tests are too expensive. The patients can't afford to come to see me. And then the generic, and this one I love the best, is it's immoral to deny medical care to the patients. Okay? Well, let's look at these individually. First of all, you can do it because you're so specialized. Well, that's complete nonsense. We had a whole panel of primary care physicians here who've managed to do it extremely well, and they've told you how they've done it. They've done it with low overhead and charging reasonable prices. Similarly, I can't have the same prices as primary care doctors because my overhead is so much higher. But at the same time, too, my overhead is extremely low compared to my competitors. And my prices are extremely low compared to my competitors. I still have competition. Within an hour's drive of my office, there are 5 other neurotologists that are essentially doing it for free. So I have to provide something else for my patients to want to come see me. The patients will place money for your time. As a matter of fact, one of the things I think that's why nurse practitioners and PAs have become popular is because they spend time with the patients. The patients don't care what your background is, what your training is, if you spend time with them, educate them, explain to them what's going on. Of course, that only goes so far if you don't solve their problems, but it does go a long way. All physicians have value to offer their patients to where they can charge cash. Number one is a niche. If you've got a niche where nobody else does what you do or does it as well, obviously that's something you can focus on. Time and counseling is something that has gone completely out of the window with the third-party payer system. I was telling some guys at lunch that there are patients that I've seen who've strictly come in for me to explain to them what the other doctors told them. And the funny thing is, I'm a neurotologist, okay? Well, they've come in and asked me about their diabetes. Go figure. The last thing is you want reasonable value. You don't want to charge an exorbitant price, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. The second comment, if I don't accept Medicare, they'll just go down the streets for somebody else to take care of them. Well, yes, they will do that, but that's not always a bad thing. There's a lot of patients that are going to see doctors that really don't value what you do. They only do it because it's free. You don't want these as your patients. These are potential disasters waiting to happen. Some of the patients will stay with you, and you'll be surprised which patients will stay with you. You'll think in advance, when I'm getting out of the system, oh, this patient won't afford me, and they won't stay. And, oh, and that one's rich, they'll be able to stay. And it'll be just the opposite. It's incredible. The ones who stay with you are truly your patients. The ones that left were never really your patients. The other thing is, new patients will show up. There are patients who are battered by the system. I see them all the time. They've been just totally treated bad, and they will show up in your office. As a matter of fact, somebody was saying, you know, Minnesota's got so much managed care, it's all tied up. Perfect environment for somebody who is going to be outside the system, because I guarantee you there's a ton of patients out there who are completely dissatisfied with what they're getting. I can't do it because my surgeries, tests, et cetera, are too expensive for my patients and they can't afford me. That's only if you charge unreasonable prices. One of the things we did as soon as we got out of the system, I looked at my prices. And the first thing I saw was, for my office visits, I thought I wasn't charging enough. I thought for what I was providing to my patients, I thought it was more valuable. So I actually raised my office visits about 10–20%. I looked at the surgical fees, however, and realized they were way overpriced, and I cut them all in half. To give you an idea why this works, there was one surgery that cost the price was $5,000, okay? Well, the typical insurance reimbursement was around $1,500. Never got $5,000 for it. So what I did was I charged $2,500 for it. It's a reasonable fee that most patients could afford. It was also something that was going to be more than what I was going to get from the insurance companies, and it was, you know, it was something where I did not have to crank out major volume to be able to still maintain a cash flow. Some patients can afford you, but rather spend their money on other things, and those are patients, again, you probably don't want in your practice. Some patients really cannot afford it, and those patients, you can do it for free. I mean, as physicians, we've all done charitable care, and the government has now made it illegal for you to do that if someone's got some kind of plan. Well, now, once you're outside the system, if you think someone deserves your services for free, there's nothing holding you back. Also, I've worked out I have a fair number of patients who do not have insurance. I have patients who come from Canada. They don't have insurance, and I've worked out cash prices with the hospital, with the imaging centers, et cetera. This is just another case of fiscal insanity. We talked about this. This was my dad's coronary stents place. He had a 23-hour hospital stay. He gets this bill from the hospital for $100,000. And he calls me up frantic, you know, oh my God, Jared, come over here. I don't understand this. And it's like, Dad, calm down. You got Medicare. Well, let's look at it. After the Medicare discount of $99,000, he had a bill of $1,000, right? Well, let's think about this for a second. Okay, first of all, the $100,000 fee charge was just ridiculous, right? And if the hospital wants to do cash, they'll never make it on $100,000 for an angiogram. The cost of one of those stents was between $800 and $2,000, okay? And he had 3 stents, okay? So the hospital lost money on my dad's case. If you look at this, a more reasonable price would probably be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. You know, so if I was doing this as a cash thing, that's kind of what I would look at. You know, what's more insane, the bill or the reimbursement? They're both ridiculous. It is immoral to deny medical care to those who can't pay. It is not immoral to deny medical care to those who can't pay. No one is denied medical care. The patient makes a decision whether it is worth paying you for the services you're providing them. If you think someone really needs something like emergency care, whatever, you can do it for free. In fact, I was telling some of the colleagues, you know, I so much do not want to have any dealings with Medicare and with our government, in such that when I get a consult from the hospital or the ER and the patient's a Medicare patient, I just do it for free. I don't charge, because I can bill Medicare in that situation and get reimbursed by Medicare. I just do it for free because I don't want any entanglements with Medicare. But the bottom line is, you're not denying medical care, you're just asking to be paid for your services. The third-party free system, the third-party system is the immoral system. Because in that system, you basically have two masters. You've got one that's paying you and the other that's receiving your services. And who are you going to listen to? I don't mean to inject religion into the talk, but the basis for our conflict of interest laws goes back to Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. And that's the basis for some of our laws. And the bottom line is the third-party system, you've got two masters. And it's a conflict of interest. Once you get out and you are being paid by your patients, you have one master. And you no longer have a conflict of interest. Now, the other question I would ask is, why would you not do third-party free? And the answer is simple: to make more money, okay? You can make a whole lot more money in another way. What's the best way to make a lot of money? Sign up for every insurance plan and run them through the office like cattle, on and on. You can make a whole lot more money, but by the end of the day, you will not be able to look yourself in the mirror, and you'll be fit to be tied. How to go third-party free? Never start is one option. Go cold turkey, which some people have done, or you could do weaning off like we've done. And then the last one I have here is MDVIP, which is sort of a hybrid model, which I think could be a bridge for some people. How do you get patients to pay cash, which is something I'm asked by some of my colleagues, and the answer is very easy. You just ask for it, and they often will pay you. The way we got off of the third-party system is, first, we were fiscally conservative with our own lifestyle at home. As a matter of fact, I saved up a sort of a war chest to where I told myself, if I brought no income home for the next 2 years, I would not have to change the lifestyle of my family. And I had that money cash stashed away. I had to pull on it a little bit, but not near as much as I was expecting, so that was a plus. Be fiscally conservative in the office. You don't want to take on new debt, eliminate all your old debt, tighten up collection policies, reduce your full-time employees, and resist the urge to hire a new associate. Because you hire a new associate, then you've got another mouth to feed. You assess your actual revenue stream from each insurer based on expenses, and also based on how much money you got from them, not what is in the contract. Because the contract may say you're getting 1.4 times Medicare, but they're denying every third claim, in which case you're really getting like 0.7 of Medicare. So you look at, where is the money coming from? And then eliminate the most unfavorable contracts first, and then reassess things every 6 months or so. And then you just repeat those steps until you're completely out of the system. My office manager had put together a kind of rather sophisticated software package to kind of figure this out for us, and it helped us get through things. Well, what happened to us, every time we got rid of one of the third-party members, we'd see volume and revenue decline somewhat, and then gradually things would build back up. We also saw a shift in the referral pattern. Back before, when I was on all the insurance plans, my practice was exclusively tertiary care, tertiary referrals. As we shifted off, gradually the doctors started realizing they'd send the patients, oh, that doctor's not on my insurance plan. They'd call back to the referring physician and complain. And the docs, I think, started getting tired of sending the patient, having the patient call back and complain, to where eventually they just stopped mentioning our name. However, the patients started telling other patients to come. And so basically we've gone more to a patient referral practice and the internet referral practice. The patients will go, and now when the patient comes with a doctor's name attached, it's usually the patient went to the doctor and said, gee, do you think it's a good idea I should go see Dr. Gianoli? And they'd say, yeah, that's a good idea. And that's how the referral from the doctor comes. This is a slide of my revenue over the last, from 2001 to 2011. And I've got 2002 as my base year, if you would. In 2001, we opted out of Medicare, and as you can see, we actually had an increase in our revenue after getting out of Medicare. And part of that's because the slots filled up with other patients, and part of it's because the Medicare patients still came in and would pay cash. The next important thing is 2005, which was the time we got rid of the last contract. And if you notice, after 2005, revenue dropped rather precipitously for the following 2 years, okay? It was a 30-some-odd% reduction. It's not quite as bad as it looks, because during that time, overhead was significantly reduced as well. I think by the time we hit bottom, I was really only had the office open 3 days a week. I was able to maintain things, as I said. I was still taking home a paycheck. But then eventually, we started doing a little bit of advertising. I put a newspaper article in the Sunday newspaper and kind of flooded southern Louisiana once a month, and that helped kind of turn things around a little bit. In 2009, we stopped the advertising, and it just kind of took off by itself, and we've been going up since. And basically, after we got rid of the last insurance contract, each year it's gotten better than the year before, and it's grown and it's grown. Then the final thing, and this is the most personally satisfying to me, was my wife finally believed me, and she's a gynecologist, and she finally decided to go third-party free in 2011. She was the best gynecologist in the area, and she was booked up for 6 months. And I'm like, honey, you're nuts for doing this. You know, all it is the ego to have your schedule booked up for 6 months. And so she finally got so frustrated with the system and how busy she was that she told me, okay, I'll do this, and if it doesn't work, I'm just going to retire. And she was completely convinced that she would completely fail and be out of business. And 2 years later, I can tell you, she is bringing as much revenue now as she did back before she did it. We did it exactly the same as Dr. Magical Dersh. Just kind of figured, okay, how much money do you want to make? Okay, we'll divide this up by 50 weeks a year, so many hours a day. Okay, this is what we got to charge the patients, and that's how we figured out how to charge your patients. What not to do, and this is a few things. I had a friend who actually wanted to do a third-party free, and he did several of the what not to do things. The first was add a partner who had no patient base right out of residency the day he started doing this. So you got an extra mouth to feed and limited volume. Took out a big loan, big office building, too much overhead, too much debt. I don't know, I can't say this about him, but you don't want to practice medicine like usual. Because as I said, I've got 5 competitors within an hour's drive. If I do the same thing that they do, who's going to come pay me when they can go do it for free elsewhere? And last but not least, run a separate office that accepts insurance. That's certainly a way to just cut your knees out from under yourself. I'm going to close with 2 quotes. First, from an anonymous plastic surgeon. Patients who pay in advance are always happier with their surgery. I'm reminded at the surgery center I worked, there was a pain doctor who placed a pain stimulator, a $28,000 pain stimulator, in a patient for quote-unquote cash, but did not want to collect the money until after the fact. We're still waiting on that check. I guarantee you, there's every single problem with that pain stimulator. I haven't talked to the patient, but if you had paid beforehand, it would have been great. Afterwards, oh, wait a minute, it's got a little bulge there, a little knot here. The last quote, patients who don't pay don't get better. This is an anonymous psychiatrist. And I'll close with one story. There was a guy came to see me who had a particular problem with his ear, and I told him, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z. He says, okay, doc, and he leaves. A couple months later, he comes back. He's got the same problem. And I'm like, oh, no. Well, did you do X, Y, Z? And he's like, oh, no, I didn't do that. I said, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, doc. Leaves, comes back a couple months later. He's got the same problem. I'm like, okay, did you do X, Y, and Z? He said, no. I said, all right, sir, I don't understand. Why do you keep coming back to me when you know I'm going to tell you to do X, Y, and Z? He said, well, it's only a $5 copay, and I figured you might say something different. I don't have patients like that anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay up here, please.
Sure.
Gentlemen, you have your choice of several microphones over here, so we're going to go right into the Q&A. for our participants. Anything that you think is relative or relevant, I mean, not relative. And I'm going to start out with a very unusual question because one of you did mention this in your talk. Why do your colleagues think that they will fare better and their patients will fare better under a single-payer system? Why do they think that?
I think it's more, kind of giving in a sign of defeat. They figure, I'm just so sick of it all, just let it all make it easier bureaucratically. And they don't know what they're going to get, but they think it's going to be better than what they have.
I would say that the vast majority of the docs that I know have no clue how they're being paid. They don't really know who pays their bill. They just know that they get paid, or somebody pays them a paycheck at the end of the 2 weeks or once a month. And the problem is that they themselves are too lazy to answer the question that you just asked. It's easier to just go along to get along. It's part of that apathy. It's part of the whole problem of we as physicians don't want to deal with the business of medicine. We just want to get up every morning, go to work, take care of our patients, and just leave me alone. And that's why a single payer has a lot of appeal to them.
Because the government can print money, Blue Cross can't.
Well, that's true.
Good one.
Dr. Harris?
Quick story was, when I first moved to San Antonio, I joined a big group that I spent about 4 years with them before I went on my own. And the group, I thought there were some unusual issues about how I was getting paid for the work that I was doing. And I thought I was doing, I should be bringing home about 50% more than what I was actually bringing home, given the amount of time I was spending on it. And so I asked to see the insurance contract so I could kind of compare what I'm getting to what the contract said. And I was told by the managing partner, oh, there's proprietary information there, you can't see it. And I promptly found a place to go and left the group, because you need to understand how you're getting paid. And the contracts are pages and pages of legal gobbledygook that frequently gives the insurance companies the right to ratchet you down at their whim. And we succeeded at one point in getting a 15% increase with one of the insurance companies, and it wasn't a year before they ratcheted us back down 14 of those percentage points. So
So in our little book, Healthcare, the Solution Consumers, we call it, we teach patients to ask the question, how much does it cost?
Right.
That simple question with profound outcomes. So before you went into your direct pay practice, if someone asked you, or Dr. Crisco even today as you practice, how much does it cost? How do you answer? How do you answer, as opposed to them, for instance?
I think in my whole career, I think I've only been asked one time.
Well, we're working on that. We're trying to teach the patients. So,
And I didn't have a clue, actually.
One thing I want to make a comment on. When a patient asks our office how much something costs, actually we tell them even before they ask. Every patient that schedules, or actually before they schedule, they're told what things are going to cost before they even make the appointment, so that there's no surprises after the fact, which is such a contrast from what goes on in a normal physician practice, where the patient comes in, the doc has no idea what the bill is going to be, the patient has no idea what the bill is going to be. 3 months later, you finally get an EOB when you find out what is the bill.
right, right, and then we don't understand what it is. In the book Medicrats, we explain that a little bit. We have a question up here.
Yeah, thank you very much for a great presentation, all of you. Dr. Sewell, I wanted to ask you about the program you said that probably won't work its way through Congress. Is that effectively a reintroduction of balanced billing? And if so, would there be strings attached to having the patient receive some reimbursement from Medicare?
Well, it is basically being labeled as Balanced Billing Act. We referred to it as the Medicare Patient Empowerment Act, because you're actually empowering the individual to be able to use their own resources to go where they want to go, regardless of restrictions from the government. Certainly, as long as it remains in its current form, there isn't enough political power on our side to push it through. So I don't look for it to really go anywhere. Perhaps it's more symbolic than anything else, but it really does answer the questions that we've been hearing about Medicare, so that you could still participate in Medicare, and those people who you wanted to accept Medicare payments on as your sole payment and not even go after their quote copay would be legal. That's not legal as it is today. And more importantly, as an opted out physician, Medicare does not reimburse my patient anything for the services that I provide, and this bill would correct that as well, in that it would pay regardless whether in network, out of network, participating, non-participating, didn't make any difference, but it would pay the patient.
So even if the payment goes to the patient, though,
Yes.
are you still subjected through some kind of a permutation to RAC committees, pay for performance, and those? Are you auditable because you are part of that transaction?
If you are opted out, the answer is no.
No, opted out, yes, but I'm wondering about the new bill that's proposed.
Well, I'm sure that by the time that this sort of thing filtered
There'd
through,
be
there would
strings
certainly
attached.
be strings attached
Yeah,
to it.
which
And
is-
the RAC issue, I can't agree more with what Adam
Yeah, I
had to
agree.
say as a good reason to get out of this business, if for no other reason than you're being threatened
Yeah.
with jail time or major penalties.
I would warn everybody that the balance billing chatter that I've heard has strings attached, and that we should lobby away from that. So,
Excellent. We have a question right here in the middle.
Yeah.
There's another one up there who wants to ask a question
We're
too.
going to right here in the
Right,
middle first.
right. I'm just pointing up there.
And then we'll
there.
go.
Okay, go ahead.
Delay with my.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
As a medical student and a resident, I was appalled at the number of times that a more enlightened patient would actually ask the ivory tower specialist, how much does this cost? And the ivory tower specialist had absolutely no idea. And I think the solution so often comes down to education. And you talk about educating the patient, but who is going to and how are we going to educate the new crop of doctors that just like any other job, they are going to get paid, and they have to know how they're going to get paid. Where's that coming from?
You and me and everybody else in this room.
It is a real problem, at least in the San Antonio area. In many medical schools, there's a Benjamin Rush Society, which tries to educate medical students on exactly that issue. And I've given a talk to the society, and real eye-openers about how not everything that they're being taught is true. And a lot of the truths, I think it's been said that the half-life of truth in medicine is about 20 years. So that half of what I learned in medical school is no longer true, more than that, because I'm well beyond 20 years out. But a lot of it is dishonest, and if you start getting the medical students to question, and medical students are not being taught anymore to think critically, and that's a real shame. And so to the extent that you can also become involved in your local community and medical school and try and maintain the concept of thinking critically amongst medical students, whether it's about the medicine itself or about the finances, that's real important. And so I'm trying to do that. I probably could be more effective, but you should try to do that
I
also.
got invited to speak to Benjamin Rush Society at Mayo Clinic, and Dr. Crisco's been down there. I asked my friend Dr. Geist, we had lunch together, I said, what is it I really want to tell them? And he said, tell them how they get paid. They don't understand this. And unfortunately, they were more interested in all the bennies that we're going to get out of the Affordable Care Act. And so it's a long, tough process. I know Dr. Crisco had a difficult time down there, just as I did, getting that message delivered. But boy, that's an important message. Up in the top there?
Thank you, and I appreciate all the good information and that you're all so many of you are going direct care. I'm here as a patient and a patient advocate, and I personally dropped out of Blue Cross and Blue Shield for a couple of reasons. One was because I want my privacy and I want to be my independent self and make my own decisions. Thank you. And the other is because I want to support you. I really feel strongly that if, at least for the time being, that you're the underground that we're going to need. You're the people that we need to be able to get our health care from. And I'm excited that AAPS has a list of direct pay docs on the website. I think that's really important. And a couple of folks and myself started something called Patient Doctor Direct, where we were trying to put together a directory, because I don't know how to find you. I don't know how patients find you except by that slow kind of word of mouth and that little bit of advertising that you might do. And so I guess my question is, if anybody wants to talk to me about the Patient Doctor Direct thing, that would be great. But really, I wonder if we can't start a dialogue or a committee or a group of us to talk about how do we get patients and doctors to do this networking so we can grow a pool, a huge pool of patients who get it. We should know what cost is. We should have our privacy and independence and freedom. And, you know, we want to, you know, have that direct care rather than all these levers of bureaucracy. So I'm really looking for a dialogue with someone.
Take a look at www.medibid.com. That's exactly what we're attempting to address.
Okay, and,
Yeah.
and are you getting direct, you're like listing of direct docs so that patients could?
It's not a listing per se. It's you put in a request for a particular service,
and-
and then doctors can respond to that, and you can choose based
Yep.
on price. You know.
And I am grateful, and you're on our website, but I want a primary doc, and I want, you know what I mean, local too, so I kind of want both. And I don't know if you're, so if we
there's
could
energy for this.
talk
Yeah,
about the goal of how we talk more about this.
Yeah, I think there's really energy about this, and something that is a takeaway from this conference even.
Well, I think, first, that's a great idea, and certainly sign me up to participate in it. But one tool which you might think about, and this is something which I've talked with some patients, even some patients whose business is running insurance companies. Would you buy grocery insurance? I mean, would you pay a monthly fee and then go to the grocery store and pay a $10 copay and go buy whatever groceries you want? What do you think that would end up doing? Well, there would be, you know, you buy more than you need, right? Food would go wasted. Right? The prices would go up because the grocery store now has a higher demand, right? The quality would probably likely go down, and so nobody would be interested in grocery insurance. How is the issue of insurance and medicine any different? I mean, I spend a lot of time telling people why they don't need an MRI on their knee or their hip, because, you know, at this point in the diagnosis, the treatment is the same regardless of what the MRI would show. So we don't need it now. But the patients will frequently, you know, sometimes I get the idea, okay, I know I'm not going to win this argument with the patient, just order the MRI. And that's part of what's driving a lot of this up. If the patient, on the other hand, has to say, how much is the MRI going to cost me?
That's right.
And what's the likelihood it's going to show something different? You can say, well, it's 1 in 10,000 chance you have cancer. Do you want to get the MRI? Most patients would say, you know, no.
Not
We
if I
get a
gotta
plain
pay
X-ray
for
next
it,
year?
yeah.
Sure.
Let's go to the gentleman down here.
I appreciate hearing your comments, because this is the first group, while I support everything they're doing, and I'm trying to do the same, it feels more like a calling rather than a business model. This seems like a business model for you guys. This has worked out well for you. And I think I've got the same questions from a primary care perspective that some of your colleagues have asked you from the primary care perspective. So I've been doing this for a little over 3 years, and I found that the patients that knew me before I did this and followed me are very happy with the care. And I'm getting a few new patients trickling in. The question I have is, how are you managing that call when a patient calls in, a new patient, and explaining your model to get them to at least walk through the door? Because once they walk through the door, they like the service, and they'll generally stay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and that's one of the important parts that I should have mentioned. Your front office people are critical.
Yeah.
You need people who are have great people skills, And to be honest with you, you need someone who's somewhat of a salesperson. And it goes back to, I think you were talking about, it's the way you say the message. And, you know, the first thing is, no, they shouldn't say, I'm sorry, no, he doesn't take those insurance. You say, Dr. So-and-so would be happy to see you. Let me tell you, he's opted out of this, and you go through a long explanation. You have a script for him. And that's the best way. I have 3 ladies in my front office that are fabulous with this. And it's exactly like you said. Once they get in the door, they don't ever want to go anywhere else. It's just getting them into the office to begin with.
I want to give you what not to do, because I did this. I said, people are not going to come see a surgeon and pay a consultation fee and then find out that there's this big bill going to become due when they actually have their surgery. So I said, here's what we do. We bring everybody, allow everybody to come in, no cost. Every consultation's free. And that way, when they come in, we won't have a bunch of screaming and hollering going on out in the waiting room about people angry that they're getting a bill and they didn't realize that I wasn't on their insurance plan. Don't do that. Because you get inundated with everybody and their brother that all comes in that wants it for free. And when you offer something for free, that's exactly what it's worth. Yeah. It's worth nothing. So make sure that you charge every patient something up front. Has to be reasonable. We charge $100 for a 30-minute consultation. If it's an hour, it's $150. Okay? I don't think that's unreasonable to come see a surgeon, and most of my patients don't have any problem whatsoever doing it. And we also tell them, you will not be charged one more dime until you know exactly what the total costs are likely to be for the procedure that we are recommending. And if you decide to go somewhere else, I applaud that. Go get another opinion. Do whatever else you have to do until you're comfortable. And it's amazing the number of people that, even though they leave, they say, gee, that sounds expensive. I don't know that I can do that. They come back. They come back because when they went to see the other guy, he didn't spend 2 minutes in the room with them, and they were off over getting scheduled for some procedure or test that I told them that they probably didn't even need.
I'm sorry, I just want to add one more comment. One of the things that we've done at Medibid to change it into the business model is going after employers and not just talking about the same old Blue Cross plan that pays a PPO, you know, something that has a reference pricing. What I mean by reference pricing, for actuaries to determine the price, you know, of stop-loss insurance and the self-funding and stuff, they have to know what the potential exposure is. So just having an indemnity plan, they have to use the charge master as the exposure. So we don't do that. They're very, very expensive. But by reference pricing, it could be Medicare plus 30%, Medicare plus 50, Medicare plus 100, and then that's what it pays. So the employee sees that, you know, for a knee, for example, I'll get 20 grand, and then when he puts it out there, if somebody bids 19, they say, okay, well, this is covered, okay? So having that, and we have, you know, some with as many as 80,000 members that are using that service, and you know, they know how much they can get, and then they shop around. They're not, unlike a Blue Cross where it's a directory, the only choice is in-network or out. The choice is, well, where did you go to school? Where did you do residency? What kind of procedures and how often do you do them? So it gives them more control.
Thank you. Up there, John.
I'm going to make one more comment, if I may. I'm going to say something a little bit kind of tying many of these together. It is critically important that you have a salesperson effectively. But we all went into medicine not for the reimbursement. I mean, I know a handful of docs who went in because they wanted to be rich. Right? Correct.
Paid, yes.
Correct. We went in. If you go into medicine to make money, you're in the wrong profession. I don't care what business model you pick. If you're in medicine for the purpose of money only, you're in the wrong place. But we all went into medicine to take care of the patients, and that's what we have the opportunity and the time to show under this business model. And I will occasionally, I mean, my office manager is my salesperson. She's the best in the office. If someone else doesn't sell them, they refer to her, and she almost always gets them in. But I'll occasionally, you know, give a free initial consultation, but only after it's been through her, because she thinks, okay, this is someone who you're going to want, and then I'll do that occasionally, but not as a rule. I agree with that absolutely.
Excellent. Let's go to John up there.
On the note of
This is the
patient
last question.
On the note of patient education, I really have two questions for you. Has the advent of cash-based healthcare financing models like health savings account plans, have they had an impact on the success of your private practice businesses? Number one. And number two, do you ever get engaged with your patients on methods of healthcare financing? In other words, recommending the types of healthcare financing that complements your practices?
I do a lot of bariatric surgery, and actually it made the transition fairly easy because a lot of that's not covered by insurance anyway. And so we already had in place a couple of different options for outside financing. We looked into having bank financing, we looked into a number of other issues, but there are companies out there that offer health insurance, or I should say health financing, but you don't want to get involved in that in your office. Absolutely.
That's not what I meant. I meant I'm recommending an HSA instead of an HMO or a PPO type of plan. Do you get involved with engaging your patients in the decisions that would help promote your practice as far as a means of financing what you do?
As a surgeon, no. There's by the time they come to see me, they've made that decision, last October. So
One comment I would make is I think the HSAs, the large deductible plans, have helped the cash-based model. And one other interesting observation I made was after getting out of the third-party system, I was out of network for everything. And so the patient looks at their insurance plan, they see, oh, I get 90% of my in-network costs covered, but only 70% of my out-of-network. But what the insurance companies don't tell them is it's 70% of a larger number. And because my fees are reasonable, I have a number of my patients that get reimbursed 100% of what they paid me because my fees are very reasonable. I had one patient who, there's one procedure that I would charge $1,500 for, and Blue Cross would routinely pay me $700. Immediately after I got off of Blue Cross, I had a patient, I charged her $1,500, she paid me the $1,500, she got reimbursed from Blue Cross $1,400. Twice what Blue Cross would have paid me a month earlier.
well, the system is so convoluted, though, as somewhat of a challenge to what he just said, and I agree with that. That happens not infrequently. But the other thing is that they don't tell the individual patients is that now, if you're out of network, the patients have a separate deductible for out-of-network services as opposed to in-network services. So they come in saying they've already met their deductible when they've been going to all the in-network folks up to now, and suddenly they have a whole new deductible for your services, and it's usually twice what their regular deductible is. And it's the way the insurance companies are using to help ensure that they keep everybody over in the corral with the rest of the sheep.
Ralph has got...
To his question was, how do you direct patients? Where do you direct them because of what you just said?
Well, you enlighten them, you tell them what the situation is. There is another option, but most of the patients who come to me, at least, who have insurance, have it through their employer. They make their decision about which one to have, and they aren't even being offered, in most cases, HSAs. That rise that we saw for a while in the increase in the health savings accounts has pretty much leveled off, and if anything, is going down because actually it's challenged by Obamacare. As I understand it, it will not be an option going forward. Certainly isn't an option as one of the so-called approved plans by the Secretary.
Not in the shop plans. Well, it could be individual plans with high deductibles, but we don't want to get into the weeds too much in insurance. You really get lost. Ralph has just one final short comment. He said.
Short comment.
And then I've got a real quick thing to share. And then we need to get one break in before twilight comes down, and you don't want to miss this. So.
I had a prospective client, 5,000 employees, the county, Rutherford County, which is where I live. They were with Cigna, and they tendered out their employee benefits, and they said one of the criteria that we're going to use to award the contract is how deep a discount you can have. Using Cigna, they were getting about a 50% discount. So I went to the Middle Tennessee Medical Center, and I said, what kind of discounts do you normally give? And they said, hey, normally about 50%. Blue Cross and Cigna gets about 50%. And I said, well, what is your charge master rate? And they said 400% of Medicare. I said, okay. Can I get a better discount, by direct contracting, a potential client? And they said, oh, sure, yeah, no problem. And I said, well, how much can I get? And they said, how much do you want? And I just threw out randomly, well, how about 75%? They said, oh, sure, no problem, no problem. And I said, great, okay. And I was feeling pretty good. And they said, well, we'd have to bill 800% of Medicare, though. Okay. So 75% discount off 800 is still 200. That's, so the whole, and I say this for a reason. The illustration of discount, is just, that's what people make judgments by. Employers sometimes make judgments by that, but it's totally smoke and mirrors.
They've been selling cars that way for years.
Yeah, this is what we wrote about in Medicrats. Just real quickly, I'm one of those guys that has to have a CPAP. I always say they used to call that snoring, and now it's a disease. But, okay, I realize there's problems with that. But it had something to do with my brain bleed. I don't know. But I had to go in and get a CPAP, and I said to the lady, how much is this new one? And she said, well, I don't know. It was like, I'd asked her when she came from Mars. She didn't have a clue. So then I asked, in Minnesota, the law says you have to tell me, you have to give me a good faith estimate. That's in our law. And she said, I don't believe you. And I said, I'll pull out the card and prove it to you. I didn't have the card, but I wanted to scare her anyway. And she said, well, I don't know. And she said, talk to the back room. So I called the back room and I said, how much does it cost for the CPAP? They said, no problem, $200 a month, 10 months on your Blue Cross contract. I said, no, but I want to buy it. How much does it cost? $1,395. What's that about? What's that about? So I decided, of course, I was going to buy it. And then I go and tell this story to all the insurance agents around the country when I talk, and they say, yeah, I got mine on eBay for $400. So here's what we're going to do. We have scheduled a 10-minute break. If we can make it more like 5.5 minutes, that would be good. And we'll bring Twyla Brace down and Dr. Orient. So thank you all.
Good luck with your transition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
This is the really good stuff. It's hard to get to this place right now.
I didn't have a good chance. I said you direct your patients to the resources. No,